They called me delusional when I traced coastlines in the sand from memory. My fiancé slapped the notebook from my hands, screaming I was an embarrassment. His family laughed as security dragged me out. 3 months later, NASA used my worthless scribbles to correct their satellite data. He stopped laughing. If you've ever been told your gift was worthless, hit that like button. This story proves them all wrong. Let's begin. My name is Thessaly, and I've spent most of my life apologizing for seeing too much. Not in some mystical fortune-teller kind of way. Nothing like that. I see places. I really see them. Show me a photograph of a coastline for 30 seconds, and I can close my eyes and walk through it like I'm standing there. Every curve of the shore, every rock formation, every shadow the cliffs cast at sunset. I can draw it all from memory, perfectly, down to details most people wouldn't even notice were there. When I was 7 years old, my grandmother took me to her village in Greece for 2 weeks. Just once. We stayed in this tiny house with blue shutters and cracked stone steps that wound up the hillside. I remember the smell of wild thyme and salt air, the way the afternoon light turned everything golden. 6 months after we came home, I drew the entire village from memory. Every house, every cobblestone, every gnarled olive tree. My grandmother cried when she saw it. She touched the paper like she could feel the stones beneath her fingers. That was the first time I realized I was different. It was also the first time I learned that being different isn't always a gift people want you to have. The kids at school called me a freak when I sketched our neighborhood park with every bench and lamppost in perfect detail. My teachers said I was showing off, trying to make other students feel bad. So I learned to hide it. I kept my drawings in notebooks I never showed anyone. I made myself smaller, quieter, less visible. That's what you do when your gift makes people uncomfortable, right? You fold it up and tuck it away. For 20 years, that's exactly what I did. I worked as a waitress, drew maps in secret, and told myself I was fine. Then I met Brennan at an art gallery on a rainy Thursday evening. He was looking at a collection of aerial landscape paintings, and I was sketching the gallery's floor plan in the margins of my coffee-stained catalog. He saw me drawing and smiled. Not the uncomfortable smile I was used to, but something that looked like genuine fascination. He was a real estate developer, confident and successful, with the kind of easy charm that made you feel like the only person in the room. When he asked about my drawing, I actually showed him, and he called it beautiful. Those first few months felt like finally being allowed to breathe. Brennan bought me expensive sketchbooks with thick, cream-colored paper. He'd take me to new restaurants just so I could draw the architecture afterward. He proposed 6 months later on a rooftop overlooking the city, and I drew the entire skyline that night from memory. Every building, every window, every radio tower piercing the darkness. When I showed him the drawing, he smiled, but something flickered in his eyes. Something I didn't want to see, so I looked away. The cracks started small. Meeting his mother, Cordelia, at their family estate, all marble and cold elegance and money that whispered instead of shouted. She looked at my portfolio of maps and landscapes with the kind of polite smile you give a child's finger painting before tucking it in a drawer. His brother Dashiell, a corporate lawyer with Brennan's features but none of his warmth, asked if I'd ever considered doing something practical with my talent. Over dinner, when I mentioned my passion for cartography, Cordelia laughed, this thin, crystalline sound that cut right through me. "How quaint," she said, reaching for her wine. "Does she also read palms, Brennan?" I looked at him, waiting for him to defend me, to explain, to say anything. He just refilled his glass and asked his father about the stock market. That's when I should have known. That's when I should have seen the map of what was coming. But I didn't. Not yet. The invitation to his family's beach house in the Outer Banks came wrapped in expensive cardstock with embossed letters. Cordelia insisted we spend a long weekend there, something about really getting to know each other before the wedding. I packed my notebooks carefully, tucking them beneath layers of clothes like contraband. I already knew I wouldn't feel comfortable drawing around them, but I couldn't go anywhere without my maps. They were the only part of me I hadn't learned to apologize for yet. The morning it happened, I woke before sunrise. The house was silent except for the ocean's rhythm, and I slipped out onto the beach while everyone else slept. The sand was wet and perfect, and my fingers started moving before I even thought about it. I began drawing the eastern seaboard, the entire coastline from memory, including the underwater shelf formations I'd studied in oceanography books. It was massive, detailed, nearly 30 feet long. I could see it so clearly in my mind. Every inlet, every barrier island, every place where the continental shelf dropped away into darkness. I was lost in it when I heard Dashiell's voice behind me. "What are you doing, playing in the sand like a child?" I turned to find him standing there in his running gear, staring at my map like it was something vaguely pathetic. Before I could answer, Brennan appeared with his parents and 2 cousins I'd met the night before. They all stood there looking at me, at my sand-covered hands, at the massive map sprawling across the beach. Cordelia's laugh came first, light and cruel and somehow worse than shouting. "Is this what you do instead of planning the wedding, dear?" I tried to explain. I really did. I told them about coastal erosion patterns, about how I could see the topography in my mind, about the geological formations and tidal systems. Dashiell smirked and asked if I'd gotten my degree from YouTube University. The cousins giggled. I pulled out my notebook to show them. Pages and pages of detailed maps, depth measurements, current patterns I'd documented. My hands were shaking as I flipped through them, trying to make them understand that this wasn't a hobby or a game. This was what I saw. This was who I was. That's when Brennan grabbed my notebook. His face had changed into something I didn't recognize, tight and angry and embarrassed. "Enough, Thessaly!" His voice cut across the beach and everyone went silent. Then he slapped the notebook from my hands. The sound cracked like a whip, and pages scattered in the wind, tumbling across the sand and into the surf. I watched my maps, months of work, years of observations, drowning in salt water. "You're not a cartographer," he said, and his voice was so cold I barely recognized it. "You're not a scientist. You're a waitress who doodles." He said it like it was the most shameful thing in the world, like I was the most shameful thing in the world. "My family thinks I'm marrying a child, a delusional child who plays make-believe." Every word landed like a physical blow. I dropped to my knees, scrambling to collect the wet, disintegrating pages. Sand stuck to everything. Ink ran in rivers across paper. Cordelia's voice drifted down, perfectly composed. "Brennan, darling, perhaps you two need some time apart to reconsider compatibility." He didn't even hesitate. "Maybe you're right, Mother." Then he called security. Actual security, like I was a trespasser, like I was dangerous. 2 men in polo shirts walked me back to the house to collect my things while his family watched from the deck. I could hear them laughing as I walked away, my ruined notebooks clutched against my chest like broken ribs. I spent 3 days in my studio apartment staring at the water-stained notebooks spread across my floor. Some of the pages were salvageable, but most had dissolved into abstract blue smears that looked like grief. Brennan sent a text on the 2nd day. "I think we need a break. You need to figure out what you really want to do with your life. This fantasy cartography thing isn't sustainable." I put the engagement ring in a drawer and didn't open it again. I couldn't draw. Couldn't even look at blank paper without feeling that slap echoing through my bones, without hearing his voice calling me delusional. On the 4th day, I forced myself to shower and check my email. Buried between spam and wedding vendor reminders was a message from someone named Dr. Linnea Voss, Coastal Geomorphology Research, NASA. My finger hovered over the delete button because obviously this was some kind of spam or cruel joke. But something made me open it instead. She'd seen photographs of my sand map. Apparently some early morning jogger had taken pictures and posted them online with a caption about beach art, and it had made its way through geography forums and academic circles. Dr. Voss had noticed something that made her stop scrolling. The map I'd drawn showed details that didn't match current NOAA satellite data, and she wanted to know where I'd gotten my information. I stared at that email for 20 minutes before I could make my hands stop shaking enough to type a response. We scheduled a video call for the next day, and I barely slept. I kept thinking this had to be a mistake, that she'd take one look at me and realize I was just the delusional waitress Brennan said I was. When her face appeared on my laptop screen, she was younger than I expected, with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a messy bun. I showed her my notebooks, the ones that survived anyway. Page after page of coastlines, underwater topography, tidal patterns, geological formations. My hands trembled as I turned each page. She went completely silent. Then she leaned closer to her camera and asked very quietly, "Thessaly, where did you get this data?" I told her the truth, that I'd just remembered it, that I'd seen satellite images, photographs, video footage over the years, and I could hold it all in my mind simultaneously. That I could see patterns in coastal formations the way some people can see patterns in numbers or hear patterns in music. She sat back and was quiet for so long I thought the call had frozen. When she finally spoke, she explained something called hyperthymesia, combined with extraordinary spatial memory and pattern recognition. She said what I had was rare, maybe 1 in tens of millions rare. Then she said something that made my entire world tilt sideways. "We've been using outdated coastal data in some regions," she told me. "Satellite coverage has gaps, resolution issues, processing delays we're constantly trying to correct. Your maps show details our satellites haven't captured yet, and in some cases, details we missed entirely." She paused, and I could see her choosing her words carefully. "Would you be willing to consult on our coastal mapping verification project?" I said yes before she finished the sentence. For the next 3 months, I worked remotely with NASA's team, cross-referencing my memory maps with their satellite data. We found 14 significant discrepancies in Atlantic coastal mapping. I identified 3 previously uncharted underwater formations. My doodles, my playing in the sand, my delusional fantasy cartography. It was helping correct navigational charts used by ships all over the world. The waitress who played make-believe was rewriting maps that had been wrong for years. NASA held a press conference on a Tuesday morning in October. They were announcing improvements to coastal mapping accuracy through what they called innovative verification methods, combining advanced cognitive spatial memory with satellite technology. I watched the live stream from my apartment, my coffee going cold in my hands as Dr. Voss stood at the podium and said my name out loud, "Thessaly." She showed examples of my work on the screen behind her, my hand-drawn maps next to the corrected satellite images. She explained how a chance encounter with beach art had led to a breakthrough in how they approached data verification. The video went viral within hours. Not massive viral, but enough. News outlets picked it up. Waitress's memory maps helped NASA correct satellite data. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends I hadn't heard from in years were sending congratulations. My grandmother called from Greece, crying again, but this time with joy. And then, 3 days after the press conference, Brennan called. I almost didn't answer. But something in me needed to hear what he'd say, needed to know if he'd even acknowledge what he'd done. His voice came through bright and warm, like nothing had ever gone wrong between us. "Thessaly, baby, I saw the news. I always knew you were special." The word "always" hung in the air like poison. He kept talking, barely pausing for breath. He'd told his family about it, and they were so impressed. "We should talk about the wedding," he said. Maybe they'd moved too fast calling things off. Maybe they should reconsider. I stayed silent and let him fill the emptiness with his words, with his excuses, with his sudden certainty that I'd been valuable all along. 2 days later, he showed up at my apartment with flowers. Expensive ones, the kind with names I couldn't pronounce. He'd dressed carefully. The navy suit I used to say made his eyes look brighter. He smiled at me like the past 3 months hadn't happened, like I hadn't spent weeks trying to tape my life back together. He launched into this speech about mistakes and stress and how his family could be intense sometimes. "But this NASA thing proves you're brilliant," he said. And I watched his eyes light up with calculations I could finally see clearly. "We could be a power couple. Imagine. Your NASA connection could help my development projects. Coastal properties are huge right now." And there it was. The truth underneath all his words. "You're not here because you love me," I said quietly. He stopped mid-sentence, confused by my tone. "You're here because I'm finally useful to you. When I was just the delusional girl drawing in sand, you slapped my notebook from my hands and had security escort me out like trash." His face shifted, defensive now. He started to argue, but I kept going. "You never asked about my maps, Brennan. Never asked why I could do this, what I saw, what it meant to me. You just needed me to fit into your world, to be small and pretty and grateful. The moment I took up space, the moment I was more than you expected, you couldn't handle it." He tried desperation then, told me I was being unreasonable, that he was apologizing. "Do you know how many women would kill to marry into my family?" I walked to the drawer, pulled out the engagement ring and placed it in his palm. My hand didn't shake at all. "Then find one of them," I said, "because I deserve someone who loves me when I'm drawing in sand, not just when NASA calls." I opened the door and waited. He stood there, stunned, holding flowers and a ring and nothing else. Then I closed the door, actually closed it, with him on the other side, and I'd never felt more powerful in my entire life. 6 months later, I signed a lease on a small office space with windows that overlooked the harbor. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms with decent light and enough wall space for all my maps, but it was mine. The nameplate on the door read, "Thessaly Hart Cartographic Consultant," and every time I walked past it, something in my chest expanded. I was working full-time now, consulting for 3 different research institutions. NASA, obviously, but also 2 universities studying climate change and coastal erosion. They paid me more in a month than I'd made in 6 months at the cafe. But honestly, they could have paid me nothing and I still would have done it. This was the first time in my life that my gift wasn't something I had to hide or apologize for. Dr. Voss became more than a colleague. She became a mentor, then a friend. We'd have video calls that started about mapping data and ended with her telling me stories about her own journey through academia as a woman who saw the world differently. She helped me write my first research paper on memory-based coastal verification. It got published in a peer-reviewed journal, my name right there in print, permanent and real. Then came the TED Talk invitation. They wanted me to speak about neurodiversity and unconventional expertise, about how the things that make us different can become our greatest strengths. I almost said no. The idea of standing on that red dot, exposed under those lights, terrified me. But then I thought about 7-year-old me, hiding my drawings because they made people uncomfortable. I thought about that girl on the beach, collecting wet pages while people laughed. I said yes for her. Last month, I went back to the Outer Banks. Not to the family compound. I'll never set foot there again, but to a public beach about 2 miles down the coast. It was a clear morning, the kind where the sky and ocean blur into the same shade of endless blue. I started drawing in the sand again, letting my fingers trace the familiar patterns of coastline and current. I was lost in it when I heard voices. A group of college students on a geology field trip had stopped to watch. Their professor asked if they could observe, and I said yes. They gathered around as I explained what they were seeing: the underwater shelf, the places where erosion was happening faster than official charts predicted, the patterns that revealed themselves when you learned how to look. One girl, maybe 19, with dark eyes and nervous hands, lingered after the others moved on. "I thought I was weird for memorizing rock formations," she whispered. "Like, I can see a cliff face once and remember every layer, every fault line. My friends think it's creepy." I looked at her, at this younger version of myself, and felt something shift. "You're not weird," I told her. "You're exactly what the world needs. Don't let anyone convince you to make yourself smaller." The irony of Brennan's ending wasn't lost on me. His development company had tried to build luxury condos on a stretch of eroding coastline, relying on outdated geological surveys because proper assessment was expensive. The project failed catastrophically. Foundation issues, coastal erosion happening twice as fast as their old data predicted, millions of dollars lost. The corrected maps that would have saved him, that would have shown exactly where the coastline was unstable, were publicly available. I'd helped create them. He never bothered to look. I guess he was too busy finding women who'd kill to marry into his family. I don't draw in secret anymore. I don't make myself small. And when I walk on beaches now, I draw maps as large and detailed and unapologetically visible as I want, because this is who I am, this is what I see, and I'm done apologizing for taking up space in a world that finally learned to look. People will always laugh at what they don't understand. They'll call you delusional, weird, too much, too intense, but your gift isn't about their approval. It's about what you see that others can't, and what you do with it. Brennan saw me playing in sand. NASA saw me mapping the world. The difference wasn't in what I was doing. The difference was in who was willing to actually look.